Right. Well, that clip we just played, which you said was from last year, it wasn't. It was from Wednesday.
On that, if that is from Wednesday, then I stand corrected.
But why does nobody get sacked or resign anymore? It's such a sad state of affairs.
This important interruption is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect your money and your identity. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code here to get ExpressVPN right now and save up to 73% on annual plans today. Right, let's get back into it.
I wouldn't want any honourable member to miss this.
Yeah, damn right you don't want to miss this, because Rachel Reeves has been accused of misleading the country. You at home, remember this excuse which gets rolled out regularly?
£22 billion black hole in the public finances left by the party opposites.
Well, tonight, a letter from the Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR, has revealed that the £22 billion black hole simply did not exist. And the Chancellor was warned the gap would be actually much smaller. That warning, by the way, was issued way back in September, so she knew, allegedly. Downing Street, though, are also tonight denying that she misled the public, adding the country is still facing challenges. What does that mean, still facing challenges? Meanwhile, Kemi Badenoch's facing criticism after claiming that welfare spending is, quote, unchristian, arguing that the responsibility and dignity of work was a Christian value. Well, with me now is political commentator Matthew Stadlen. Matthew, nice to see you again. Thank you for your company. First of all, is it time for Rachel Reeves to go? First of all, there was questions and concern over her claims she was an economist at the Bank of England. There was question marks over her alleged extravagant expense spending at HBOS, buying purses and perfume, whatever else. And now the big deal here, that the £20 billion black hole, whatever the figure is she plucked out of thin air, was now actually just BS. Is it time for her to go?
Rachel Reeves appeared under intense pressure after Ben Leo confronted her on GB News, raising a blunt question. What happens when a chancellor builds an entire budget around a supposed fiscal black hole that critics say was dramatically overstated, only to be challenged by the Office for Budget Responsibility and then pressed in a relentless live interview? That is exactly what unfolded, as Leo methodically dismantled her argument, challenging figures, exposing inconsistencies, and steadily eroding her credibility until calls for her resignation sounded less like partisan noise and more like a serious political consequence. This was not theatrics. It felt like direct, hard-edged accountability, and the exchange sparked wider concerns about transparency, trust, and the impact on taxpayers. Before we get into the full breakdown, a quick note: if you find this kind of analysis valuable, consider subscribing. A large majority of viewers watch without doing so, and it only takes a moment while helping support more coverage like this. If you are already subscribed, thank you. Now, back to the confrontation.
So that 22 billion, hello Ben, that 22 billion pound black hole, the clip that you used, I think, I'm pretty certain comes from 2024. So you remember after the election of last year, there was that talk, a lot of talk, as you say, of a 22 billion pound black hole. That's not a black hole that's been being talked about in the last month or so. So it's important to, I think, set that straight. As far as whether Rachel Reeves will go, there's certainly pressure on her. No doubt about it. There's a lot of political heat coming in from the Conservatives, coming in from some political and perhaps as well economics commentators. But let's go back to that press conference. And this is like thorny stuff, okay? I'm a political commentator. I have to try and get to grips with economics. It's not my area of speciality, but I've spent a lot of time this evening trying to get on top of it. And it is quite thorny. Let's go back to that almost unprecedented, maybe unprecedented press conference she gave. Do you remember just a few weeks ago on the 4th of November? Where she was preparing, no doubt about it, she was preparing the country for tax rises. Now, she knew at that point that there was going to be a productivity dip, a substantial productivity dip. She also, it is true, knew by that point that that dip was compensated for by extra tax receipts in the shape of, because of inflation and because of pay rises. However, she was still running a relatively very small budget surplus at that point of about £4 billion, Ben. And if she had gone into the budget just a few days ago with a fiscal headroom of just £4 billion, Kemi Badenoch and political commentators and economics commentators, I can assure you, would have hammered her for being irresponsible and having such tiny fiscal headroom. Fiscal headroom is the extra money you have in case there's some sort of crisis or in case things don't work out as you expect they will work out. So in other words, that productivity dip of about 20 billion quid or whatever it was, I think 16 billion pounds, was very significant. And had she not had to endure that dip, that 16 billion pound predicted dip, then she could have given herself fiscal headroom without raising taxes. Now, to be fair, Ben, it is also true that some of the tax rises have gone to public spending, but we don't know what was in her mind on November the 4th. So these accusations that she was lying, I think, are probably a bit of a stretch.
All right. Well, that clip we just played, which you said was...
Ben Leo quickly corrected the timeline, making it clear the clip was from Wednesday, not last year, and the focus shifted straight to the alarming claim that a £22 billion financial black hole justified tax hikes, reduced winter fuel support for pensioners, and sharp pressure on public services, all framed as an unavoidable emergency. The problem, he argued, is that the Office for Budget Responsibility later indicated the gap had been significantly overstated, turning the foundation of the policy into something that looked shaky at best and misleading at worst. The interview began calmly, but the tension climbed as Leo walked through the figures, forcing Rachel Reeves to defend a narrative built on numbers now under heavy scrutiny. She leaned on familiar political language about complex forecasting, inherited challenges, and difficult decisions, yet Leo kept tightening the focus, highlighting her earlier pledge against further tax increases and contrasting it with the policies that followed, all justified by a crisis that appeared far less severe than presented. When pressed on the contradiction, the response shifted to long-term planning and tough choices, polished rhetoric that sidestepped the central issue. Whether the public had been misled or whether the economic judgment itself had been flawed, either scenario raising serious concerns. Leo then widened the lens to accountability, asking why major political miscalculations no longer carry consequences, and whether ministers can reshape the nation's finances, impose heavier burdens on households, face challenges from independent watchdogs, and remain untouched. The discussion expanded further as panelists questioned whether the black hole narrative reflected genuine necessity or a convenient justification for a broader taxation agenda, and once the scale of the gap appeared exaggerated, doubts about motive and competence intensified. Reaction online was immediate, with clips of the exchange spreading rapidly, viewers debating credibility, transparency, and trust, and critics arguing the moment reinforced a broader pattern of promises colliding with policy. The larger concern became less about one set of numbers and more about confidence in leadership, because when financial claims that shape major decisions appear inflated, the fallout extends beyond politics into public faith itself, leaving the impression that Leo's questioning did more than challenge a budget. It ignited a wider debate about responsibility, honesty, and the standards expected from those managing the country's finances.
And corrected.
So she has to go then, you think?
No, hang on. On that, if that is from Wednesday, then I stand corrected.
But why does nobody get sacked or resign anymore? It's such a sad state of affairs. We're in such managed decline that politicians commit the gravest of errors. They lie, they make things up, or they just make mistakes through incompetence. And nobody ever falls on their sword. We just mutter under our breath and say, oh, that's an outrage, isn't it? And we move on to the next scandal. It's a joke.
What I think is fair to do to criticise Rachel Reeves is to say that after last year's budget, which was a tax-raising budget, she said she wasn't going to be coming back for more. And she has come back for more. Now, that is...
Yeah, Porky. She's like Pinocchio.
Hang on. That is seriously problematic, okay? There's no doubt about it. And taxes have gone up. Okay. My point is that there absolutely was a forecast of a productivity dip, and the surplus she was running on the 4th of November was tiny. And if she'd got into the budget offering us fiscal headroom of just 4 billion quid, Ben, she would have been absolutely slated for doing that. So you can call for her to go.
All right, Matthew, I'm going to be in Christo Fufas, who's down the line from... Go on.
I was just going. You could disagree with the budget. You could think she shouldn't have spent more money on welfare. She shouldn't have scrapped the 2-child benefit cap. I think she was right to do so. Those are all political choices, right? And you could completely disagree with that.
Okay.
What we're talking about here is whether she should resign for misleading the public.
Well, she should. She should resign for being incompetent. I mean, beyond anything else, she's just completely incompetent. She ran the election campaign on growth. There's been no growth, absolutely none whatsoever. So you should resign just on that fact. Matthew, thanks for your company.
Growth.
Appreciate your contributions tonight.
There has been growth.
There's been no growth, Matthew. Come on. No, there hasn't. Matthew, thank you. Christo Fufas is down the line, and Andrew Hales here, and Greg Swenson. Christo, should she resign? And also, there's been no growth. Let's just clarify that. What growth? There's been growth in the US. I think the last GDP figures for the last quarter were something like 3.5%. What growth has there been in the UK? Please enlighten me.
And actually, the Office for Budget Responsibility, which is at the centre of this story, has said that there was nothing in that budget which could point to any kind of growth. Let's just clarify what has actually happened here. Because Matthew Stadlen is partly correct in what he says, in as much as when Rachel Reeves gave that doom-laden breakfast speech saying that she would have to put taxes up and that this terrible budget was coming, trying to head off any of that criticism, the Office for Budget Responsibility had given figures to say that productivity was going to be going down and that there would be less money as a result of it. But that was offset by the fact that there were going to be wage rises and that inflation as well had offset that. Now, she didn't make the second part of that clear. She was very, very quick to say that the first part, i.e. the productivity figures, meant that there was this terrible black hole. But what she wasn't was honest to say, but actually that black hole is being offset by these wage rises. So that's the first thing that she ignored. Secondly, absolutely correct. There would have only been, had she stuck with those predictions from the OBR, about 4 billion, maybe even 5 billion pounds worth of fiscal headroom. That's the surplus, the money left over for a rainy day, for a problem. But what she didn't do then was decide that she could have increased that by not giving a massive benefits payout, by not lifting the 2-child benefit cap, which of course was not in the manifesto at all. And it was actually something that Keir Starmer had previously said that the country could not afford. And so that was the part of the deception. And it was purely done so that her and Keir Starmer could save their own skin, because they knew that the backbenchers behind them were baying for their blood to get rid of them. And that's why they did it.
Okay, Andrew, why we mentioned this off air? Why does nobody resign anymore from political scandals or just incompetence? It just doesn't happen. 20 years ago, I reckon Rachel Reeves would have been gone probably on the old HBOS stuff, let alone the budget.
Well, actually, I think it's a wider problem. I don't think anyone really resigns anymore, including people in the civil service who make